Well,
Hey, sir.
oh, sir. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing fine
It's
for a
good
seasoned
seeing
man.
you. Yes, sir. Seasoned man. You got good seasoning. That's what you got. It's good seeing you.
It's good seeing you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wonderful.
Yeah.
How you been?
I've been fine. How about yourself?
Doing well.
Good,
Doing
good,
well.
good. I hear a lot of good things about you.
We trying to stay. We trying to keep things moving in Toledo.
Good.
That's what we're trying to do. How about you?
Same here.
Good.
You know, we're running for the Lucas County Sheriff.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's never been a politician before, so it's an
Right.
experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yes.
I think that's a very good thing to have folks that's not been in that space get in that space.
Yeah.
So it's real good. Now tell me this. Now I think I know this, but how long have you been retired?
Oh, since 2012.
And I know retirement is a loose word.
December 31st, 2012.
Got it. So that was your last day of officially punching that kind of
Correct.
clock.
Correct.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. So that's good. That's good.
So how about you now? Because I hear you got this wonderful position.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So things are well. Education is obviously a really big deal, and that's what I'm working on now. So this process and what we're now calling as an organization Hope Toledo.
Okay.
The Hope stands for helping our population educate. So the goal is to help coordinate and deliver higher quality educational experiences, and that's from birth to career. So we're working with
great.
children all the way through youth and young adults. So the whole concept is to try to really drive solid early education, that's through pre-K, several other components, and then work on the post-secondary side and getting them ready for the world of work, whether that's 4-year, 2-year trade. So that's what we're doing, and we've got this organization Hope Toledo that we're standing up. So far it's good. I mean, we're specifically working with Scott High School.
Okay.
So, and you're familiar with
yeah.
Scott. And where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to Gunko Elementary School, Dukemo College.
Dukemo. I've heard that several
LP
times.
Stewart when it was a boy-girl school.
Yeah.
Parkland, which was an all-boys school.
Okay.
And then I went to Libby and graduated from Scott.
Got it.
So I was all over.
So you was all over. So you Libby and Scott.
Oh, yeah.
How you did that cowboy.
Cowboy and the Bulldog.
Yep. So being at Scott. And working with those kids, because there's such a rich history at Scott.
Absolutely.
Right? Rich history at Scott. Both my parents went to Scott, graduated 55, 65. And so to be back in the building, to be in the building and working with those students has been really outstanding. So they've got had the opportunity to go on to post-secondary experiences, those that took up the opportunity. And right now I'm working with probably 82 students out of the graduating class. So there was about 120 or so kids that graduated, completed all requirements. So about 80 of those, so about 2/3 made the decision to, yes, I want to go pursue post-secondary. So, a few challenges out front, just adjusting to college and doing all that. But I mean, they're really, really digging in, which is cool. And I think education is one of the great landscapes that we can help shape. And if we can get that going right, these kids now have an opportunity to change, their trajectory, but also change the landscape of Toledo.
Oh, great.
So yeah, that's what we're pushing on.
Man, and I thought it was so awesome for the gentleman. I think he was from Ottawa Hills.
Yeah, grew up in Ottawa Hills.
Right,
Yep.
and he gave them an opportunity to go to school.
To do it. So he grew up in Ottawa Hills, moved on to Chicago, but has made a decent living.
Correct. Yeah.
As far as making the money and accumulating wealth, and wanted to give back. And so it's real cool being able to see him interact with the kids, and he's done that a couple times. COVID has made it difficult, very real, but we were able to get him on Zoom calls and do all of that work to drive it. And as I've talked with several people, I think that education, if we can invest in education, it can impact these other areas that we're looking at with life. And so a few of the kids, or one kid in particular, is looking to go into law enforcement. So I'm thrilled by that.
Great.
And and he's always wanted to do it, and I'm like, let's go.
Great.
Yeah. And I was sort of shocked, right, that he wanted to do it at this period in time. So I guess you being in law enforcement, talk to me about how these last 4 to 6 months, I call it the triple pandemic, COVID, financial, racial.
Correct.
Talk to me about what what that looks like
Oh,
how we
man.
got here.
Yeah, we're in such a difficult period right now.
Yeah.
With all three of those things. But I guess the biggest thing for me is the relationship, the community, government, community, police relationship that has really, escalated during this COVID period of time. And so, man, that's something that's affecting everybody across the board. And when this tragic happened with Mr. George Floyd, it sent a shockwave through this country.
Absolutely.
Not only this country, throughout the world.
The world.
Because people were upset over that, watching that black man die at the hands of a police officer. His whole life just taken out of him.
Yeah.
Something that is shocking to most, but not shocking to all of us.
Right.
Because we've been through this before.
Absolutely.
Just people didn't understand.
Absolutely.
And now they feel some of the things that we've been feeling as African Americans for years and years.
Yeah. And I would say that even just the mere fact that it was captured
Correct.
on video like it was, and I've said this to a couple people who are like, seem to be amazed, like, I can't believe this happened. And I've said to a few people that in recent years, we've seen, whether it was, Walter Reed, whether it was, or Walter Scott, I think it was, or others who we've seen in the middle of a crossfire, right? Or in the middle of, this type of action happening to them, being killed or facing police brutality or whatever, it's been caught on camera.
Correct.
Doesn't mean it ain't been happening.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's been caught on camera. I remember that May, was it 27th, 28th, sitting on my couch and like in tears. And I don't do a whole lot of crying. I cry more today. I think it's because my daughters are older, and so they, sort of drives you there. But I remember sitting there in tears, like, this is actually happening. And I promised myself I wasn't gonna watch the video. But then I did, and it's literally overwhelming.
Oh, yes.
And I think what was overwhelming for me, and I think what really grabbed some people, was the total lack of care and concern by the hands of the officer. So it's like he, his knee is on his neck, hearing him saying, I can't breathe, I need, this, calling out for mama, so on and so forth, and like not moving, like, nothing y'all gonna do. You can keep your camera on me. There's nothing you can do to me. And I think it's that moment, and 8 minutes and 46 seconds of that moment,
Correct.
that has us here talking about this now.
Absolutely.
Not like these conversations haven't happened before, but I don't know about you, but it feels different this time.
Oh yeah, and it just and I'm with you on it. Just looking at the officer, it looked so comfortable in what he was doing.
Yep.
And so that is something that I've always addressed in any police citizen brutality, is that who makes an atmosphere so comfortable that you can do these things in it.
Right.
And so we've addressed that, and those are some of the things we need to look at when we look at police reform as well.
Yes.
We need to look at that conduct, and why is that conduct? We talked about systemic racism that's in police agencies. I lean more towards a systemic attitude in police, because that day I don't think you could have found a more diverse amount of officers. We had a black officer, we had a white officer, we had a Oriental officer. That this black man still lost his life. He had a black police chief. And so again, we need to address, in my opinion, the systemic attitude that officers have. So.
Now you've been in law enforcement how long?
Oh man, 39 years.
39 years. So you've seen good, bad, this, that, and the other. One thing that I've always wondered is, and I've heard this said, and I've thought it myself, and I think I saw officers actually come out and say this was wrong, right? But oftentimes you don't necessarily hear that, right, from law enforcement. They may see an issue, and the question will always be, well, there was something else there, or you don't really know. So, I mean, talk to me about that that thought process. So you mentioned systemic mentality or systemic attitude, I think is what you said. For me, help me understand what that looks like, because I think one of the issues that we face today is this lack of understanding between quote sides.
Correct. Absolutely.
And what creates that mentality.
Well, and in my opinion, over all the years, because I've done police officer investigations, agent investigations that involve some misconduct of conduct policy and all. And sometimes when you look at this, if you don't straighten out a conduct, or behaviors that are against policies or laws in an officer, and it continues to fester, that officer then, especially if they become a training officer, that same attitude spills over to the next officer, whether the officer is black or white. And that's why I say it's a systemic attitude opposed to a systemic racism. And if you don't correct that, you get just what you had with George Floyd, someone that just felt so comfortable to do what he was doing, and another one that felt so comfortable in keeping people away,
just to watch it.
And the other ones that helped this, that felt so comfortable. And so, and that's what I look at. I look at, who made an atmosphere so comfortable? It's supervision.
Yes.
Because supervision had to be accountable for those officers out there. So, so when I look at that as well, some officers are afraid to say something, because if you're going to stop police brutality on the street, only another officer can do that.
Absolutely.
And so we need to understand that. Sometimes I talk to officers, even black officers, African American officers, and say, you were there. So what do you think about that? Well, I seen it, but Earl, sometimes if you say something, they ostracize you, and so my next comment to them is that you need to hang that badge and your weapon up.
Absolutely.
And go find another profession.
Absolutely.
Because your job is to protect the public. I say this, what starts in the academy, we don't teach our officers, in my opinion, anymore, that they're public servants.
Yes.
They're public servants first.
Yes.
And that citizen that you encounter is your boss.
Absolutely.
It's not the police chief, it's not the mayor, it's that person that pay those taxes, that pay your salary, that pay your benefits, that pay your retirement. And then the next thing to look at is that citizens, because citizens are not all innocent in this as well.
Right.
And so we have to look at, to me, you have to look at both sides.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes a citizen's conduct can then escalate a police contact with them as well.
And I think that's the component that is difficult to have that kind of conversation. So when you talk about, what did the citizen do in that space? So let's just be honest. We talk about Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was asleep.
Correct.
Breonna Taylor didn't do anything to get murdered inside of that space. Now, some would argue several different pieces, but when I look at others and how they may respond, so just today, ironically enough, someone stopped me and asked me a question because I stopped in the office, and so they stopped and asked me a question about my current role and what I'm doing, so on and so forth. But then they went down this road and started talking about response to police.
Mm-hmm.
And their question to me was, well, what do you do like when police stop you? If police stops a person and the person runs, then what do you do? And my response to them was I think you first got to deal with what's the root, right? What would cause me to run from an officer in a situation? And I need to ask that question out loud and say, what's going on there? Not that it justifies by any means shooting a person in the back, doing this, that, and the other, shooting an unarmed individual, any of those things. But I'm wondering from our citizen perspective, so when we talk about public servants and they're there to serve the citizens and the relationship, I said this earlier today to somebody else, that we talk about community police relations, like police aren't a part of the community. Like there has to be these two discussions going on at the same time. And I'm wondering, how do we get to, or can we, and I don't know if we can, but how do we get to this space where we are all a part of the community, and we have different roles, we have different spaces where we plug into the community, but I need to treat you like we live in this community together, and you need to treat me like we live in this community together. And I think we're missing that component significantly.
It took time to get here.
It did.
Like I said, when a fresh officer goes through the academy,
Yep.
they're not carrying all this baggage with them yet. So someplace along the line, they learn this attitude, and I call it the attitude of we against you.
Yes.
And a lot of times that happens when an officer does something that's maybe against conduct policies, and they're called into the office and they got a complaint. And the first thing they start looking at is that citizen complained about this, and they start developing this attitude towards that citizen. They look at another officer, a fellow officer. There's a complaint on this officer. An officer look at this, well, you know, the citizens are complaining about us, and they start developing this we against you attitude.
Right.
They look at what happens in other cities, other states. And so let's take Toledo for instance. We may protest what happens in another state involving a citizen. And so then officers take that personally to mean them. So that increases that we against you attitude.
We against you. Yeah.
And next thing you know, we have an attitude of Blue Lives Matter too. And then that attitude goes to Blue Lives Matter, we against you.
Absolutely.
But what the officer forgets is that your paycheck comes from that citizen that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And so we need to get back to in our academies, and then reinforcing that mentality of being a servant to the public.
Yeah.
Reinforcing that attitude of being a peace officer.
Absolutely.
Because I'm here to keep the peace.
Absolutely.
And so if you change it around from being a law enforcement officer towards you to keeping the peace, that's a whole different mentality.
It's a whole different mentality. So when I look at police community relations, and I just said this a second ago, and I was at a conference and they were talking about this, and it started really grabbing me because I've said it often, right? Okay, we need to improve police community relations. So then I started asking myself, are we all in the same community? And if we are, then the longer we fester or foster, as you were just saying, a we versus you mentality, a police versus everybody mentality, we're not going to get far.
Correct.
And so when I think about police community relations, one, I wish we could change that language, right? I wish we could just talk about community relations and talk about people living in community, working in community collectively together. And I know that's a difficult thing to say, and so some people will look at John and be like, you crazy, because that ain't gonna happen, and they not us and we not them, and so on and so forth. But I think about it from the perspective that if my family member is quote unquote a police officer, then my perspective automatically changes. So I've actually had family members, close friends, that have worked state troopers, police, you know, so on and so forth. And so then my discussion changes. And I've had a few conversations with people, and when you take them to task on it, they're like, you know, at one point they were, you know, I'm against the police, I'm against the police, I'm against the police. But then one of their family members joined the force, and they're like, okay, no, everybody ain't like that. And I think we've got to change our language, is where it's, to me, is part of where it starts. Now, it also starts with, obviously, you know, levels of reform, changing laws, doing those types of things. But as long as we keep a us versus them mentality, and we do that in our own communities, it's this us versus them mentality, as long as we maintain that, maintaining that does not foster, at least my thought, any kind of coming together to work effectively together for the betterment of the entire community. So for me, my first thought when I think police community relations, we've got to change language. We've got to start talking differently about it. And some would say, well, you got to start, you know, living differently about it. Okay, cool. I'm down with that too. But I think you become what you speak, and that's a critical component.
Yeah, police officers need to understand the community that they work in.
That's where that's a huge component.
Correct, and you know, we have a program that's called Cultural Competency for Police Officers.
Yes.
And simply in that program was really started when I was Deputy Director of Ohio Homeland Security. We had an issue with the Somali community in Columbus and with the police department there. And because of a language and a cultural barrier, a Somalian ended up being killed by a police officer simply because of that barrier.
Absolutely.
And so so what that program does, it kind of give messages to the police officer is that this is the kind of community, kind of culture that you're working. Now when it comes to enforcing what you have to do, or being that police officer, you still have to do that, but you need to understand that community. For example, me as a seasoned man, you know, I'm 70 years old, so I have some baggage that I carry from in the day when I was a kid going down south.
Yes, sir.
And seeing signs that said no colors allowed, or colored restroom, and I've had two uncles that were just about eaten by police dogs, and so all that is a baggage I carry.
Yes.
And so when a police officer pulled me over, and I've been pulled over before, 'cause
yes,
I'm a black man too, and they walk up to the car, and if they say certain things to me, man, that baggage comes back up because I'm looking at them going like, you know, you know, I've been through this as a kid, so I'm still seeing the same thing, and have we really grown? So you're absolutely right. We need to take that barrier away, because community is community, and police officers need to understand that community.
Absolutely.
And if they don't understand that community, you get them being afraid of that community. You get them, you get them because they see things on television, or they hear their partner say things, or they come up as a child with a perception of what this community is like. So when they start working in that community, they have that same perception.
Absolutely.
Unless you can break it down and start them over and rebuild their mindset as to the community that they're working in.
Because they have to work through this process of unlearning the things that they learned prior to getting there. And I think in this instance, I think there is some both ways kind of conversation, because as you just mentioned, the way you grew up, you're just a smidge older than me, but my dad has had many of those, similar experiences, so he shared them with me. So then my brain, coupled with my own experiences being a black man, right, and triggers are real. So when something happens, it triggers, an emotion. And so at that point is where, we've got to be able to have conversations with our own folks within community. So if I'm talking specifically black community here, and you could do this with whatever community it is that you live in, but even in a specific neighborhood, that could be a mixed neighborhood or whatever, but there are experiences that people bring to the table.
Correct.
And those experiences then shape, form, color how you react in a situation.
Absolutely.
And if an officer does not understand what that experience is in that neighborhood, and if the neighborhood doesn't understand what these other experiences are, so when we call police very quickly over something that some folks would say was minor, police come in, they're coming to handle the situation. So we want to say, hey, they're going to come in and everybody's going to be, they need to come in with a level of cultural competence, flat out, and understanding what's going on in the neighborhood and what's going on amongst that in that environment, because that can help to de-escalate the situation that's there. But I think that's where open conversation has to kick in, so that we begin to talk and really understand what's going on with this situation, and then have the various policies, procedures, laws reflect what should be happening inside community. And I think that's a piece that really has to get worked on, because some of the current laws, policies, and procedures don't foster that kind of an environment. It fosters that us versus them.
Well, and I would have to look at what policies and laws that would be, because even a police officer that goes through police officer school, training that you have to pass, there are standards of that training. Not only that, the Supreme Court rulings on police conduct. So all of that is out there. We as police officers just need to adhere to that.
Got it.
As well. But I can tell you this too, because police community relations means just what it says. It means, as you said earlier, we're all in this together.
Right.
And so if we take that attitude as police officers, that we're all in this together, I need you, you need me, man, do you see how much further we can go with this a relationship?
Absolutely.
And so we need to reinforce that amongst our officers, and we need to reinforce those kinds of things amongst our citizens too.
Absolutely.
Because, as I said earlier, sometimes I tell citizens you need to look in the mirror, because as a police officer myself, and working a lot of things, and I worked undercover for a number of years in a particular neighborhood. And so I got to learn that culture and the way that neighborhood moves. And sometimes you look at it and go, man, we need to have more discipline in our family. Now, I'll say this all the time, because a police officer sometimes have to deal with the lack of discipline in families. And so when they really came around and took the discipline out of the family's hands, because now a kid can call 911. When we were a small kid, if you called
wasn't happening.
No,
wasn't happening if I even looked at the phone.
Correct.
To try to do it.
And so now we've taken the discipline out of the family's hands.
Yep.
Then we go to schools. We took the discipline out of schools, because they talk about. Somebody just asked me this the other day, man, what do you think about resource officers? And they're about my age. And I looked at them and said, when you were in school, did you have a police resource officer in your school? And they said no.
No.
I said, I'll tell you who the resource officer was.
Yes,
when
sir.
you go in the cloakroom, you see this panel, that was a resource officer. And in your home, this belt or that switch I got off that tree was a resource officer. We took all of that away, and I've heard this said before, is that now the parents are afraid of their children.
Yep.
They go to school, the teacher's afraid of the children.
Yep.
The principal's afraid of the children, the school board's afraid of the children, and the children's not afraid of anybody. That does not make sense, and that's an ingredient that sets that community up for failure.
Every time.
And then we blame the police officers, because they have to come in and resolve issues that we don't take upon ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because of courts and what have you. And so we need to work together with the court system, with other family organizations, and the family, to put that back into the home. And I guarantee you, like when we grew up, you go down the street and do something before you got home. The neighbors knew about it, and when you walked in the door, your mom knew all about it.
The information was there. We also have to take into account what drove and what even drives the change in our neighborhood. So I don't disagree, because I look at some of our young people today and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But then I turn around and I look at some of our adults today, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing, because our children, and I'm an advocate for children every day, all day, our children are going to model and reflect what they see from adults. So if my child is doing something that I think is crazy and out of line or whatever, I can't really just say it's all the kid. I got to look at what did I do or did not do inside of that space. And that's not saying I blame parents. I'm talking about a society that has really poured into our kids a whole lot of stuff that's violent related. So whether that's the video games they play, whether that's the games they play, just in general, all of that, we're breeding some of this violent activity back and forth, and then you want to say, oh, let it stop. So if I think about a magic wand, or what I see or would like to see, I believe that some of the challenges, if not the majority of the challenges that we see in community, I think it comes down to two things. One is a total and complete lack of resources. And when I say lack of resources, lack of equitable resources. So I look at some of our educational resources, and I'm not saying that dollars aren't available. So some folks would argue there's Title I money, there's this money, there's that money, so on and so forth. But how are those resources being effectively used within a community to impact the community for the better? So when we talk about poverty, to me, it's not so much poverty from, I don't have enough money, physical money. I may not know how to effectively utilize those resources. So to me, a magic wand would be the effective allocation, that may not be the right word, but the equitable allocation of resources to communities. I don't think that simply because one particular neighborhood tends to be a more affluent and means they have less crime, that is irony. I see it as, if the level of resources are lower or poorly used or not equitably used, then it's going to create a challenge. So somebody said to me middle of the summer, when we saw a little uptick here in Toledo around, violent crime, shootings, this, that, and the other, and I'm like, so it's not that, this ain't rocket science. Kid ain't in school, kid doesn't have a job, family may be struggling financially because COVID has now exacerbated this issue. What do you think is going to happen? Not that violent crime has to be a direct byproduct of, but oftentimes that's what it is. It's not that people just wake up in the morning and say, I'm just gonna go shoot Earl. Now there's a handful, I'm sure, that are that way, but that's not your norm. Stuff happens, one thing leads to another, boom, you have this happen. And so for me, the lack of equitable resources, if we could find a way to say we are the richest nation, arguably, in the world, that's what people say we are, but yet we have some of the most disparate gaps in medium income, in employment, in education, access to health, in housing. I mean, I can keep going the list. Why is that? Last thing I'll say, and I'll be really interested in your magic wand, but I look at over the past 6 months, the individuals who have gotten richer, organizations that have gotten richer, were already the richest. And so there's a mentality going on with that. Somebody just told me yesterday, there's this Amazon Prime sale going on, and everybody and their mama I see out on Amazon spending their money. Right. And so then you wonder why Jeff Bezos made $300 billion, or however much he's increased his wealth over the past 6 months. Is because people are like, I ain't got nothing else to do, so I might as well just spend my money. Well, why couldn't you use that money to help this kid, or put it into this, or help with that program? It's amazing to me how the inequitable allocation, or inequitable use, or ineffective use, I'll say, of resources really exacerbates the problem. And if we could change that, I think we could begin to see a trajectory that might move communities into a positive direction.
Yeah. And my magic wand supports your magic wand totally, because the problem that I see in our community, the African American community, is those lack of resources and economic empowerment. Period. Yeah. If I had a magic wand, I can wave it. I would wave it that we wake up, because we spend the most money in the world. I forget how many trillions of dollars, 3.2 or $5 trillion a year of black economic money that's being spent elsewhere and not in your own communities.
Absolutely.
Like others do for, in their community. We are spenders. Yeah. We're not savers. And if we understand the power of spending, the power of that economics, we would do better. Yeah. For our children and for our communities, for our families. And so my magic wand would just hope that we would wake up one day. Yeah. And I wish people would read about Wall Street. Yeah. Although we had that tragic happen, and that's another story for another day. Yeah. We were taking care of us. We're taking care of our own, like other races do. And so we need to wake up. We need to understand education is the key to change. Yeah. If you want change, those changes can best happen within.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to our young people, I talk to them, especially those that are in criminal justice programs. You know, what do you want to be in life? Well, you know, I don't want to be a police officer because there's so much stuff out there. But so if you're going to complain about something and you never become part of the solution, you're going to continue to complain, and your children are going to complain, their children are going to complain. So my magic wand would say, you know, to wake up, to realize your economic power in this country. Wake up and realize your educational power, because one of these days, and Buffalo Soldiers' wish is to take a group of kids to Tuskegee University. That's where my daughter graduated. And so these young kids can see those young black men and women walking across the stage getting a bachelor's degree, getting a master's degree, getting a doctor's degree. And so that they'll know this little circle you live in your community isn't what this is all about, y'all. This is not you. This is you. And so we need to broaden their horizon and their knowledge on what's really going on out there.
Yeah.
And I always say this: what you feed on, you become.
You absolutely do.
So if you continue to feed on negative every day, if you feed our children negative every day, it's no wonder that they have no value of life.
Right.
And one of the things you and I need to sit down and talk about, and Dr. Durant, we need to put programs back in our schools that teach the value of life. Because if you can take this firearm and point it in another child's chest and pull the trigger, you don't value that life.
Yeah.
And so we need to get back to those things. And again, my magic wand says, back to discipline in the home, back to discipline in the school, understand and know your economic empowerment, spending empowerment in this country, and your education.
Yeah, I think those are, you are so spot on, because at day's end, the last thing I would add to my economic or my wand, because I agree with what you just said, it's also finding a way for people to be able to have critical discourse because you can disagree, and that's what we're losing, if not coming close to lost. You can disagree, but you don't have to, everything doesn't have to fall out. My grandmama used to say, tooth and tongue will disagree sometime, but they don't fall out the mouth, right? And so at day's end, what I get concerned about is the fact that we can't have these kinds of conversations that allow for us, because our egos get in the way, our own agendas get in the way, and so then really great ideas go lay out on the wayside, and we could be doing so much better with what we do have, and then we could increase our economic empowerment by collectively working together, so we can then drive that kind of change across the board. I think it's doable. We living in some tough days.
Oh yeah.
We live in some tough days, but I honestly believe that it's doable. I think we're in a different space. We're moving in a different space, and we can get there.
Well, I have a favorite song by Michael Jackson.
Yes.
That's called "Man in the Mirror."
The Man in the Mirror.
So until we look in the mirror,
yes, sir,
and we understand, what our actions is doing to our community and to our children, we'll never get anywhere.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm so appreciative of this conversation. I hope the whole community sees it.
Yeah.
And we need to wake up.
Absolutely. Oh, this was good. Brother Earl, I appreciate you.
We're going to do more than shake hands.
Yes, we are. We masked up.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we do. It's good seeing you.
Okay. I think the result of this is going to be hopefully a better relationship when people see this. So I think all around this whole meeting and conversation was great. The program is just super.
Being able to learn and listen and understand a different viewpoint, a different perspective was the expectation met. And I think this has been a wonderful experience. I'm really excited that the Legacy Project has instilled this series called Voices, because it actually drives us towards really building out what we need in our community from a police relationship.